Hello and welcome to Hope Palm Springs Virtual Church. We hope that you are enjoying these weekend videos that we do for you. We do them to keep you involved, to let you know that we're still here and having a good time and wishing that you were here also. But we're not just doing these videos. We have a lot of things that we've been doing, so please make sure that you check your newsletter. But really what we're doing is we've already opened our church. We're not waiting to open. We're not going to wait until somebody says we should open in a building. We're having our church right now, and it's every Sunday at Wellness Park on Tachiva. 8 o'clock in the morning. Bring your chair, your sunglasses, your mask, and probably a bottle of water, and come join us. We have a good group that meets there already, but we would love to have you there because this is us doing church now. And from the sound of things, it might be us doing church into the future a little bit. So don't wait, come join us. We have a lot of fun. We get to know each other again, and we've learned to know some new people that have come also. Come, we'll look at each other, share with each other. Tim will, of course, share some inspirational things, and we'll just have a time of sharing. Won't last more than an hour, and we promise you'll be in the shade. It's nice, cool here in the pool, and it's not that hot in the park either. So come at 8 o'clock, and we'll see you there. I'm Carl Stevens. I am so glad to see you, and so meet us on Sunday. Thank you.
The Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 14th chapter. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled. And they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. The Gospel of the Lord. As we consider this week's Bible reading, we meet a Jesus who both feels and feeds. A Jesus who has an affinity with us because he knew human emotion, and a Jesus who was concerned about not just the spiritual needs of people, but also their physical needs as well. So first, let's talk about this Jesus who feels intensely human emotion. The first emotion Jesus feels in this text, in this Bible reading for today, might be easy to miss because the text implies it without being specific. The reading begins, "Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself." Well, what is the this that Jesus had heard? Well, the passage immediately prior to this reading recounts the murder of John the Baptist. That section ends, "John's disciples came and took the body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus, who then in turn withdrew to a deserted place to be by himself." Prior to that, Jesus himself had returned to his hometown where he faced rejection and where the people took offense at him. And so we can only imagine Jesus' grief and the mourning over the death of John, which was piled on top of whatever he must have been experiencing or feeling at being rejected in his own hometown. Well, Jesus goes off by himself to grieve, to mourn, and to pray. So does it surprise you that Jesus also needed alone time? And that he felt the intensity of human emotion, that the same difficult feelings of pain, loneliness, and devastation that you sometimes feel, the same feelings of rejection, loss, outrage, even despair, that Jesus felt those things too? For Jesus was fully human, and in solidarity with those for whom he had come, he intended not simply to only sample our humanity and return to the heavens to file a report in triplicate about life among the humans, but to experience fully what it is to be you and me. In doing so, he would become enabled to feel the one thing that would motivate everything he would do. The text doesn't say how long Jesus was given to grieve over the death of John, but we know it wasn't long because the crowds followed him on foot from the surrounding towns. When Jesus came ashore, he saw a great crowd. And this is where we begin to discover the heart of God. The text says he had compassion for them. Now the Greek verb here, splagnizomai, normally translated as had compassion, is really a watered-down translation of what the word actually means. For splagnizomai refers to the inner parts of a person's body. And so really when we speak of the compassion of Christ, we're talking about a gut-wrenching, intestinal, twisting, visceral emotion of care. In other words, when Jesus saw the crowd on that hillside hungering not only for food, but for life itself, he literally felt sick to his stomach. It was not only an intense emotional reaction of the heart, but a violent reaction that created physical sensations throughout his body. And in the Gospels, it's important to note that splagnizomai is never simply an emotion. It is never just a feeling, but something so powerful that Jesus is moved to do something, to act in order to help the people for whom he feels such depth of emotion. The first thing Jesus does is to heal their sick, and then he feeds them. Well, we'll get to the feeding part in just a moment, but let us not rush past this Jesus who feels. For in him we see the heart of God, a heart that is not only transparent, but broken because of what God knows about our humanity. A heart broken for a suffering world in the midst of a pandemic. A heart broken over the division in our country. A heart broken over inequality between races. A heart broken over our individual difficulties and problems. So we sit with Jesus for a few moments and see the heart of God. A God who is moved to pity, anger, outrage, despair, and yes, splagnizomai, compassion. Or perhaps better, Jesus sits with us in whatever place we are emotionally, in whatever state of grief we know at the moment, in whatever place of anxiety, in whatever frustration, even in that horrible place of loneliness and despair that we sometimes know. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, Scripture says, for this reason, so that God could sit with you in a real way, that you might not be alone in whatever you are experiencing right now. And in compassion, God hurts along with you, experiences what you are experiencing, the God who feels. But this is also a God who feeds. The text says, when Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd and had compassion for them and cured their sick, reminding us again that the compassion of Christ is not just empathy or sympathy. It's not just a feeling, but a verb that leads to action. But then evening comes and people are becoming hungry, and the compassion of Christ leads him to address even that need. And to do so, Jesus multiplies the meager resources that his disciples could scrounge up. The disciples wanted to just send them away. Jesus tells them they don't have to go away. You feed them. If you listen deeply to the text, you can hear the disciples stammering. They're flabbergasted. They're stuttering. They're astonished and a little bit outraged. I mean, they say, well, we've got nothing. Well, nothing except for just 2.5 fish sandwiches between the 12 of us. Not really enough for us and you, Jesus. So yeah, we've got next to nothing. Next to nothing. 5,000 hungry people, and all they have are a few fish and loaves of bread. You know, I wonder if we don't often feel the same way. Like the need is so great, but the resources are so few. That COVID is so powerful, and we have become so vulnerable. That systemic racism is so prevalent, and change seems nearly impossible. The discouragement and despair so pervasive, and the hope within us sometimes just a tiny spark. We bring our meager supply to the table of life's problems, and it seems like someone's idea of a bad joke. I mean, such huge issues, and we have next to nothing. I have to say, and maybe you agree, that these stressful days are very wearing. I mean, for me, not just my body. I mean, I've taken more naps than ever, but my spirit. These past months have taken a toll on my love for life. I mean, I used to see life as this great adventure with which I embraced with passion, but lately life has become something that is more to endure than embrace. Oh, I manage, but whereas before that was just my normal, nowadays I find that even the simplest of tasks require me to go searching for an energy to accomplish them. And honestly, there are just some days when that energy is nowhere to be found. In those moments, I feel I have nothing or next to nothing. I've got next to nothing left for this ministry, next to nothing left for my family and friends, next to nothing left for the moment. My 5 loaves and my 2 fish compared to the rather large needs and demands seem ridiculously inadequate. I must remind myself of 2 things. First, that Jesus understands. For this is the same Jesus that wondered in the Garden of Gethsemane whether he could drink the cup of suffering that had been placed before him. His own strength depleted. His few loaves and fish inadequate. His next to nothing despair requiring a strength beyond his own. I often complain that God is not as sensitive to my needs as I'd like God to be. And yet I know that in Jesus, God has felt every human emotion I've ever experienced. I am grateful for a God that whispers in my heart, I understand him. I know what it is you're going through. Now, don't do what you usually do. You send me all sorts of texts and messages saying, gee, Pastor, you seem so down. Sorry you're having such a hard time. Now, I love that you care for me. Don't get me wrong. But I think I'm just normal right now. A bit discouraged, sad over the state of our country, and angry for a lot of good reasons. But I recognize, too, I don't know any more difficulty than any of you. And many of you know so much more difficulty than I'll ever know. If Jesus felt human emotion to be in solidarity with us, so we too feel human emotion to be in solidarity with one another. To some extent, we are all in the same boat and can say to another person, I know a little bit about what you're going through. I know we're all unique individuals, and we can never presume to feel what another person is feeling, but never before has generations like ours been so bound in a common misery. Perhaps we've earned the right to say to one another,
I think I understand what you may be going through because I feel the same way too. And that sympathy, empathy, allows you and I to sit in the same space with one another, to find company in each other's pain, and to recognize that we are not as alone as we may feel. Besides, there is always strength in numbers. Jesus said, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. Not just his presence, but his heart that feels what we feel, his emotional self on fire with the same sensations, anxieties, and concerns. In our next to nothing moments, we have a Jesus who cares. And here's the good news. Next to nothing is Jesus' favorite thing to work with. In other words, what we have, what we bring to these moments, if only a few fish and loaves of bread, is enough. Our next to nothing is ample material for God to bring about something amazing. Jesus multiplies the food. He feeds the multitude, and there's plenty left over. God can turn next to nothing into more than enough. And that, my friends, is compassion, a God who feels what we feel and then does something about it. A God who feels. A God who feeds. Amen.
Rescued me, I will praise you, Lord, for your mercy. I will praise you, Lord, you have rescued me. I will praise you, Lord. I will praise you, Lord, you have rescued me. I will praise you, Lord, for your mercy. I will praise you, Lord, you have rescued me. I will praise you, rescued me. I will praise you, Lord, for your mercy. I will praise you, Lord, you have rescued me. I will praise you, Lord. Rescue